Hi, everyone. All right, I think we'll just get started. Hi and welcome to our first ever Librarian Live workshop. This is essentially a series of different workshops that are designed to help build students and faculties and staffs research skills in various ways, specifically as it relates back to some of the Cuyamaca College Library's resources, which we'll be covering today as well. But yeah, so today we're going to be actually covering, the topic of research articles and specifically on how to find them. Which has been it's always a noted difficulty that's faced by many students who are just trying to write their research papers or course projects. Essentially, what we're going to be doing today is discussing a specific search tool that is allowing students and faculty and staff to find research articles in a much more simplified, straightforward, very efficient way. And that is going to be through this tool known as OneSearch. My name is Matthew Chase. I'm the instruction librarian at Cuyamaca College Library. I'm fairly new, as it were, only been here for a few short months, but I've been really excited to meet and discuss with students and the rest of the college community about what the library has available to offer. And so hopefully this workshop will be a pretty helpful tool in that fashion. So before we actually get into OneSearch and its breadth and scope of what it can find for you for your course projects, again, your research, if you're doing anything outside the college, anything like that, or just generally interested in finding more evidence-based information, let's get into it. So what I wanted to kind of first cover is defining what exactly is a research article, because I think there might be some different interpretations about what is a research article and how do you identify it when you see it. I feel like people have different criteria when it comes to it. And honestly, research articles are constantly changing in structure and so on, but honestly, a lot of them are kind of fundamentally very similar or have overlapping qualities or features that you can kind of recognize as being able to identify whether or not what you're looking at is a research article. So one of the first things, the central premise of a research article is that it is an article based on an original or secondary research study. So it could be anything from like a study that researchers had conducted regarding like a focus group of a certain population, say students, and looking into their attitudes about, their educational experiences. It could be anything from also like a clinical trial that clinical practitioners or researchers had conducted on a certain type of disease or health disorder, and so on. When I also specify secondary research, there are such things as secondary research studies. Often these take in the form of very comprehensive and very structured reviews of existing original research. So it could be what we know as like systematic reviews, scoping reviews, literature reviews, and so on. So yeah, there's a whole breadth of diversity when it comes to what is a research study, which is really exciting and maybe something we can always talk about in a future workshop, or you can always address it in the your questions. Feel free to leave them in the chat, unmute yourself at any point. Yeah, feel free to ask. So another quality about research articles is that they're written by an expert or experts in the field. And the field could be of any type of discipline, academic discipline, professional discipline that you can think of. And oftentimes they're a researcher professionally, or they might be a professor. So even if you're a student, some of your professors may have written some research articles. Even librarians like myself actually can participate in writing research studies and ultimately making them into articles, or publishing them as articles. So, which is pretty exciting and something I've always been personally interested in. But yeah, so the one other key element that I think would help a lot of students in order to be able to identify a research article when they're reading one, or when they think they're reading one, is knowing how they're structured. So like I said, research articles are changing a lot in how they're kind of composed, how they're written, how they're published, but there is still a traditional format that a lot of articles will kind of observe or cling to, and they often have these certain sections within the paper that you can kind of readily identify as being related to a research article. One being the abstract, which is basically the summary of the article. It's often at the beginning of the article or in the record that you find in a database or a search engine like OneSearch, and we can easily identify where that is. You might also see the section for methods and methodology, so talking about how the study was conducted. You might also see results, discussion and findings, conclusion, and probably one of the most underrated elements of a paper, but something that can be really important when you're actually conducting a literature search is the references at the very end. So yeah, these are really some core sections that you'll probably see. They may be written in different ways sometimes or titled different ways, but honestly, they usually kind of overlap to like abstract methods or methodology, results, discussion or findings, or even analysis. Sometimes that pops up too. Conclusion, and then references. And so the other question kind of revolves around what is a research article is the other kind of question, which is what is a scholarly article? And I'm only addressing this because research articles are pretty typically, there's very few exceptions to this, scholarly articles. And you might have a question about what is a scholarly article? And it can actually be really important to know this, especially when addressing certain filters or limiters or relative features in a search engine, say like OneSearch, and other databases. So the key features are very, very similar to a research article, but you'll probably notice some differences. Is that scholarly articles are published in journals for experts by experts, and that is pretty similar, or pretty much the same as a research article. Very, very similar. They typically discuss research, so they might be a research article, like I said, but there are certain exceptions. Not every scholarly article is a research article. So they can sometimes also be articles about theoretical discussions. They could be an editorial or commentary article, or a book or article review. So they can be these different types of articles, but not necessarily about a research study specifically. So scholarly articles are usually published in a peer-reviewed scholarly journal, but not always. And you might be asking yourself, what is peer review? You might have seen it before, but you actually may not know necessarily what is peer review. Essentially what that means is that before publication, the article may be reviewed by a panel of other scholars in the same field, often within the same topic. They might be experts of the topic that the article is talking or addressing. And they are basically reviewing the paper for soundness and quality, in order to give a further consideration if the article should be published or should it be accepted for publication, but may require some revisions to improve the way it was written or how it was addressing the topic, or even the study itself. Maybe it wasn't really clear on its methodology, for example, or maybe there was a connection that was made in the findings, but it's not really substantiated in how the study was conducted or what results came from it. And overall, just assessing the quality of that article, evaluating whether or not it's something worthwhile to publish, and that it contributes something to the existing knowledge that we have about that topic. So one of the things, though, is that even if a journal is peer-reviewed, not every article is published within that journal, and it's not necessarily peer-reviewed. For example, book and article reviews or editorials that you find in peer-reviewed scholarly journals are not typically undergoing this peer review process. It's typically more the research articles that are addressing a certain type of study and whatnot. So yeah, so you want to be mindful of that. So one of the other questions you might have, and probably something you've been doing already, is maybe you've been trying to Google for research articles. Maybe you've had a research paper and you're trying to look for information about it, specifically research articles, and you're using our what we often consider a very trustworthy search engine known as Google, right? And just looking through the internet. And that's not necessarily a bad approach, but the thing we really need to consider is, should that be your only approach? And there's actually some limitations as well as benefits to using Google or other types of internet search engines. But there are limitations you should be aware of, especially when it comes to research articles. So for example, with Google or Google Scholar, which is a much more specialized search engine within Google, you can find vast amounts of online information. I'm sure we all have done searches and we can come across like millions of results, right? Which we probably aren't reading past like the first or second page, but it does offer that, right? So for Google and Google Scholar, they're really superior when it comes to finding background information on your topic, finding summaries, finding some commentaries or other types of discussions about your topic. You know, they might be through websites or blogs or online encyclopedias or, you know, what have you. And it gives you a lot of really great, rich background information about your topic. They're also really great in that sense too, to identify concepts and terminology that you may not have been aware of, you may not have come across before, and use them as keywords in your future searches, which would actually come into a lot of use when you use research databases or even OneSearch. One of the things, though, that maybe people don't really realize is that it's not necessarily the best when it comes to finding scholarly articles. You might even consider that Google Scholar, it has scholar in the title or the name. You would assume that it's actually pretty good. It is to a point, but the problem is if you've done a search through scholarly articles, or I'm sorry, if you go through a search of Google Scholar, you may come across a lot of scholarly articles that fall within the criteria that we've been discussing of what makes a scholarly article. Not all of them are necessarily research articles. And they may not even be a scholarly article either, because there might be times you find a book or an ebook. You might find some dissertations and theses or reports or other types of non-traditional articles. Known as like the gray literature, essentially. And so, yeah, those are not necessarily scholarly articles. And it's even harder to kind of identify whether it's a research article unless you dive deeper into the record of a specific result. So it's not really great. You might also notice, especially when we talk more about OneSearch, is that it doesn't have a whole lot of features that allow you to really sift and sort effectively and efficiently through all the results that you're finding. And Google Scholar and Google are really more useful when it comes to finding free or open access articles when they're available. That's not necessarily guaranteeing that every article you find is going to have a free or an open access option. Basically, Google and Google Scholar are specifically looking for articles that are openly available online in some way. There might be a copy that's been uploaded to the internet of an article that you might be able to access, but a lot of the times when you're actually going through it, you might click on it and it's actually leading you to a website that's charging you for it, either to buy the article outright, to download it, or to only rent it for a select amount of time. And you may even notice that a lot of the articles can be pretty expensive. It can run up anywhere from like a few dollars to all the way to like $30 for one article. And so you have to do that individually. And so it can be pretty expensive. And as a student, and even as a faculty or staff, we're probably pretty strapped when it comes to that. We can't afford that. even on the best days, right? So it's a lot more efficient to really access a lot of the research that's available through the library. And that's where we come up with Cuyamaca OneSearch. So Cuyamaca OneSearch is basically our equivalent to a Google or a Google Scholar, but it's specifically a search tool that allows you to access multiple databases that we have subscriptions to simultaneously. So you can actually bypass a lot of the paywalls or the subscription costs that you would normally find on Google Scholar and actually access it through your affiliation through the college and your affiliation to the library. And this way too, it's more specifically geared to search through research databases. It doesn't necessarily go through the open web. In some ways it does, but for the most part, it's actually more focused on research databases. So therefore, you're probably going to be a better chance of finding scholarly articles and specifically research articles. One of the things too is that when I was talking about keywords, what you really want to do and be mindful of is not to necessarily paste your entire question, your entire sentence right into the search bar. You may do that with Google, and Google does a fairly standard job of like deciphering what exactly you're looking for. But with OneSearch and other types of databases, they often really want you to use a few, like no more than maybe 3 or 4 at most, oftentimes, specific keywords that are related to your topic. The ones that are probably the most relevant, the most specific to what you're trying to find. And then, and just to emphasize, you're accessing databases that often have subscription costs attached to them, but because you're affiliated with us, you're able to kind of bypass that without paying a dime, which is great, right? It's always good. So what are we waiting for? Let's go search for research articles. So let me bring it up real quick. All right. So I provided in the chat for you to link to the library website, which you can find on the Cuyamaca College website. Pretty easily enough, but I provided the link, the direct link, to make it a little easy for you so you can follow along. But yeah, so here, I'm sure you've probably visited maybe once, maybe twice, maybe more, which would be awesome. But yeah, if you look through, you can actually find a lot of resources available to you through the library. And namely, the very first one that we have listed as the top, because we think it's probably one of the crucial steps to really accomplishing a lot of your course assignments and so on, is Cuyamaca OneSearch. It is the central search bar to where, again, you can access multiple databases simultaneously, all from one place. Because you may have actually looked to see like what kind of research databases we have available, which you can see on the left-hand side here. You can click on this, and it actually leads you to a listing of all of our available databases. And as you can note at the very top here, it actually lists how many databases we have accessible to you, which is over 70 databases. That is a lot of databases to have to go through, right? Individually. So it's a lot easier to actually use Cuyamaca OneSearch as a central place to kind of do a launching point to find what is really out there. It's also important to keep in mind, I said that Cuyamaca OneSearch can access multiple databases. I didn't say that it could access all of them. There are a couple databases here and there, especially ones listed here, that you can't necessarily get direct access to or see on Cuyamaca OneSearch. Namely, an example would be like Country Watch. It would be like CQ Researcher if you were looking for like opposing viewpoints type of literature, or like, pros and cons. You may not also find the Swank Digital Campus Database, which is basically a database of films. So you may not find it there in Cuyamaca OneSearch. So it's important, like if you did need to do a little bit more deeper digging, you can easily access these individually and do a similar search, right? You can probably copy a lot of the keywords that you were using and then replicate the same search in these specific databases. One thing to also keep in mind too is that you might notice that there's different descriptions for each of these databases. And we've been annotating each of the databases to kind of give you a better idea of what's exactly in there. Because even though they're all research databases, they don't necessarily contain research articles. They may only focus on research articles. Many of them do. They may only have some, but they also have magazines or newspapers and other types of materials that are not necessarily scholarly or research related. And some don't have anything at all in that way. They may not even have any articles. Like I said, even the Swank database has specifically films that you can access and use. Films on demand is another similar type of film streaming, multimedia type of database, and so on. Or even biographies. Like this specifically is more of just biographical content, not necessarily research articles. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind so you can kind of see a really good description of most of these. If you ever notice any issues with that, like maybe it's not really clear, you can always contact us and we'd be happy to address that. But yeah, so going back to the main website page here, we're going to just put in a couple keywords. What could we do? Let's say we want to look into psychology, and we wanted to look at specifically maybe the bystander effect, which is a pretty popular concept or phenomenon that's addressed in specifically social psychology. I'm just using it as an example, but honestly, whatever your topic may be, you want to break down whatever your topic is or whatever your question is and kind of break it down to its core keywords. So if I was doing a research paper or anything like that was discovering about or discussing bystander effect, I may want to use that definitely, and maybe use other types of terms or words that I want connected in some way. But honestly, you don't really need to worry about grammar. You don't really need to worry about syntax, sentence structure, punctuation. Most of that stuff you don't need. You just need those specific keywords. So as you can see, like this is not a proper sentence at all. This is not a proper question. It's just psychology bystander effect. But it's the most effective way of getting to where you want to go in the literature. So as you can see in the search results, it pulled up 7,891 results. That's a lot of results to have to go through. And like I said, it's because Cuyamaca OneSearch is going through multiple databases and searching up what is relevant according to your keywords that you inputted. But there are ways to actually kind of filter this down, which is really nice, and maybe reduce the number of results that you're looking at. Just to make them a little bit more specific, a little bit narrower, and closer to what you're looking for. On the left-hand side here, there's the refined results section, which has a lot of limiters or filters, basically ways of being able to set parameters, set boundaries around what kind of information you want to look for. You can limit to like full text. So if you want to only specifically look at what we have readily available to us, you can definitely do so. But it does prevent you from looking at articles that we don't necessarily immediately have for you, but we can get them through what we call interlibrary loan service. And I can briefly touch on that in just a bit. Here's something we just talked about is peer-reviewed journals. I think this is a really great filter that's really handy. Specifically, what it's going to look for is going to look for scholarly journals that have been peer-reviewed or that have a peer review process embedded into them. So if you click on this, basically, it's going to filter down all the results to only results that relate back to an academic or scholarly article that has been peer reviewed, which is really great. You can also do print books in case you're wanting to see like what exactly we have at the library physically, like all of our collection, or maybe you're looking to see if we have a copy of your textbook on reserve. That might be another way. So that's really convenient if you ever need to do that. You can copy and paste the entire title of your the book, and you can easily do a search for that there. Or if you just wanted to search for any books that we have on a certain topic, you can certainly do so. But keep in mind, those are probably not going to be research articles. More than likely, it's not. It's only going to be about books, which might have research included on them or in them. But if you're looking for specifically research articles, I would use that filter. But it's always an option if you ever need it. Publication dates. So say like maybe I only need articles published within the last like 10 or so years. So I'm going to just put like 2013 to 2023 just to see what's available. And it narrows it down even further. So we just literally cut the results more than half, which is a lot more manageable. Still a lot, but definitely much more manageable. So maybe you have an assignment or a paper where you don't necessarily need peer-reviewed sources like peer-reviewed journal articles, but you do need academic or scholarly articles. And like I said, not every academic journal or scholarly journal is peer-reviewed. So you might want any type of scholarly articles that are not necessarily peer-reviewed. You can easily, instead of clicking on the peer-reviewed journals filter, you could easily have clicked on academic journals, which would filter it to only include academic or scholarly journals that may or may not have been peer-reviewed. So you can definitely click on that. You don't necessarily have to click on both of these at the same time. If you're already clicked on peer-reviewed journals, you don't need to click on academic journals. And if you clicked on academic journals, you don't need to click on peer review because it's going to filter out the ones that weren't peer reviewed, which might have been useful to you if you don't have any requirements about your article. Any sources that you find must be peer reviewed. But there's sometimes you have an assignment that says it should only be peer reviewed. You can also filter for magazines. You can filter for reports, books, all that kind of stuff too. You might also get some additional keywords here, which you can easily click and add to your search if you wanted to. You can limit by publication. I don't really see much need for that, but there might be times you want from a certain type of journal that you know is very popular within your field or your discipline. You can also limit by language, which is actually really useful because say you might find a really great article, but it's written in Polish and you don't know Polish, you don't know how to read it. So you might want to be working ahead of yourself and just click on any of the languages that you're proficient in. If you're proficient in English and say like maybe Turkish or Arabic or Spanish, click on those, and that way only those results pop up, because you might come across, again, like an article that looks so good. The title and the abstract were written in English, but the rest of the article is written in, Polish, Chinese, Spanish, a language you just can't read. The problem too is like you might ask yourself, is there a software available that you can use to translate the full text of an article? There are some, I think, but none that are free, and the free ones are not that great. Pretty much the best one available right now is Google Translate, which I'm sure we've all used. And it's good for a good majority, but it can be also really difficult to get the full context of a sentence sometimes. Like sometimes it'll mistranslate something. And that's even more so because some of these research articles often use like jargon or really specific terminology that doesn't have a translatable equivalent. So you might be missing out on certain context, certain concepts that are being addressed as a result. So you might be unfortunately misinterpreting what the article is about if you try doing it that way. You can also limit by region. Sometimes you might be required to only look for research articles that were published any research studies that were more centered in the United States or maybe overseas, anything like that. You can definitely filter by that. I wouldn't limit by database. This kind of defeats the purpose of using OneSearch, but it just gives you a good picture of like what's available through all these different databases. So, but yeah. So one of the last few things I want to address here before we head out is, like once you have this like set number of results, you can start kind of pouring through them. It'll give you the title of the article. It'll give you a little bit of the citation information about it, give you some subjects that were like, they're basically tags that were associated or labels that were tagged onto the article to kind of give a little bit more clarity about what the article is about. You can also use these as additional keywords. It might give you some ideas about it, or you can pretty much use them for yourself. So if we have the immediate full text, which means like the immediate PDF, say, of the article, so we can actually get a copy of it. There's a couple different ways you can go about it. One, you can use like the PDF full text link. You can also see like full text open access. You can see other types of options, full text finder, and basically, these are all just leading to slightly different places to get to the same place. Like I said, Cuyamaca OneSearch is searching through multiple databases at once. So basically, the reason why these links look different from each other is because sometimes it might be leading into a specific database we have, or a specific website we have access to, or subscription with. But ultimately getting you to the PDF. The only time that like it will directly say we don't have the PDF copy of it is say like for this option, it shows HTML full text as one option among the PDF full text and all that. And that's really just like a web's version of it. They can't really download. You can try download it, but you probably have to do print download. But luckily it does have a PDF full text option here, which you can click on, which is really nice. And you can easily download it for your use and keep it. Then we can go back to results. So that's really nice there. Another way of kind of taking a deeper look into an article, because say like, that's great, we have a PDF full like copy of it, but is the article really right for you? And do you really need to go through like 20 to 25 pages to figure out if it's right for you? Not necessarily. Sometimes you can actually figure it out by clicking on the title of the article. Say this one seems really interesting based on the title, but you can scroll down a little bit here and see an abstract, which again is the summary of the article that the author wrote to kind of, again, summarize the core points of the article. So it's a really great way of assessing whether or not an article is worth reading the full manuscript, the full paper. And so, yeah, it can save you a lot of time by reading this. And like I said, there's subject terms, which are really nice. You can click on any of these and add them to your search and so on. But for right now, we're going to go back. And again, you can even see the full text links on the left-hand side from this view. You can also get some really nice options here. You can either upload the information of this record to Google Drive, to OneDrive. You can print it. You can email it to yourself if you wanted to. I used to do that quite a bit as a student. Not as much anymore, just because of different options. Saving it, citing it. They actually do have a citation generator tool here. Keep in mind, as with any citation generator tool, always be wary of it. Always double check it to make sure it's actually correct. Sometimes it may look all correct, and then there's like a certain thing about it, like it didn't italicize a certain part of it that you needed, or the capitalization was a little wrong, or the authors were not presented correctly, like their names and the initials and such. You can export it, you can create notes, you can get the permalink, which actually is really nice. If you ever need to revisit this specific record later on, you can keep this as for yourself. You can keep this permalink, which is really nice. Do not use the link in the browser. That will break eventually, pretty quickly, shortly after you exit out of all this. This is the link you want, the permalink. So last couple things I wanted to address with OneSearch here is, again, if there is no article available, it will be blank here. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you'll have to do a couple of steps to get to the article. Say you're really interested in this particular article when it comes to authoritarian regimes and bystander effects. You really want to get this article. Luckily, there is another avenue, and that is Interlibrary Loan. It's basically a service where we connect with other libraries across the country and exchange articles with each other, exchange PDF copies. And we can even exchange books as well, although that does take a little longer. But luckily with research articles like these, you can often get them within 1 to 3 business days upon your request. So the sooner you can put in the request, we can work on getting that to you. So it's a really efficient process. I know it seems like it takes a while, or at least you can imagine it might take a while, but it can be actually pretty fast if you just request it. Even if you're not sure about the article, request it anyway. It doesn't hurt to see if it's actually something worthwhile while you look for other articles. So if you go on to back to the library website, you can actually see an interlibrary loan option on the left-hand side here. Click on that. We have some information about what is interlibrary loan and all the different parts of the process, but really the request form for it is right here. Click on it, you fill out all your information, whether or not it's a magazine and journal photocopy, which is basically what you're looking for with research articles. Fill in all the citation info. Luckily, the article record here actually has pretty much all the information we'll need, in terms of the year, volume number, page numbers, all that kind of stuff, what journal it was published in, author information, all that kind of stuff, which is really great. Fill that in, put in your contact information, and then submit the form. And it comes to us, we process it, and we'll work on getting that article to you as soon as we can. A lot of times we don't take up to 3 business days. We just kind of emphasize that because sometimes there's an article that's pretty hard to get, or it's very rarely subscribed by different libraries, just because maybe the journal is not very popular. That sometimes happens, or it's a very small journal, or just doesn't have a lot of connections with our collections among different libraries. So that's the only thing to kind of consider with that. One last bit I want to provide before we head out is right at the top here. There's actually a new feature that we added, which I'm really, really excited about, which is known as the concept map tool. And basically, this is a really cool way of being able to build out your keywords and visualize them, visualize the different connections with them, and maybe get some more ideas. So if you click on concept map tool, you can basically, it gives you a little introduction here, which is nice. It gives you a connection point. So like, bystander effect was our main keyword, right? It's basically connecting to all these other related keywords or other types of concepts that might be of use to you. And you can kind of deeper dive into them. You can see like maybe a definition about it, just to kind of make sure that you're addressing the right terminology. You can click on this one and you can explore that concept further, or you can even add it to the search. So even like with bystander effect, maybe I want to add it to the search. On the right-hand side here, it's already added here. And then I'm going to click here. And maybe I'm like, oh man, Milgram experiment. I didn't even think about that. And so you add that to the search as well. And you can click out and you can see there's already starting to build a connection between all these articles, or I'm sorry, these keywords. Or maybe you're just like, I want to look into about empathy, right? And see what else is out there. So we explore what empathy is and see all the other connecting points with empathy. And we can add those as well, depending on if they're relevant to us. We don't want to add all of these, because the more you add to the search, the less results you'll get, but eventually it can get to the point where it's zero, because maybe there's no real connections being drawn in the literature to all your different keywords. So that's why I always say, like, keep it to about like 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 max keywords. Sometimes you may use more, but really you kind of have to kind of trial and error it. See what kind of comes up, and don't feel like you have to be stuck with your keywords. Change it up. See what's out there, see different orders of them, take out a keyword, add a new keyword, see what results kind of pop up, because the results will constantly change with different arrangements of keywords. And so we can do like see full results. It returns us back to Cuyamaca OneSearch, and we get a whole new set of results. And we just apply all the filters and we're good to go. But in any case, I think we're at the end of our time here, which is totally good. But yeah, I want to thank you for joining me in this session as we talk about research articles, what they are, and also how to find them using specifically Cuyamaca OneSearch. I hope this gives you a pretty good idea of how you can start doing your research. how you can, complete a lot of the requirements for your course papers or assignments and discussion boards or anything like that. So hopefully this helps you out. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information is basically found at the front of the library website. Feel free, contact us. And yeah, hope to see you again at the next Librarian Live workshop.